picture. It was still a nonprofit Sharon Hospital. That's our position, and I don't think there's anything.
My question to Bob is, Meg and I were involved with one meeting at the sewer beds to go over the plans. After listening to all this and reading the minutes, and I've read all this, it comes to my mind that Bob hired flooring from Time and Materials. It comes out that we never went to bid on these things. As chief executive officer of the town and the road superintendent, if you were concerned about extra money, why don't you go to Mr. Palmer and say, how much is this going to cost us? Meg and I were not aware of this.
Okay, let me explain it to you. I'll explain it again, John. We had this booklet that Menard Engineering prepared, and there was 8 different scenarios in there of how we would construct this drainage project. We took the scenario number 1 was the one that was taken because that was the least invasive on the, for the parking lots and everything like that. We didn't have to do anything to the digging up the parking lots, changing any of their retention ponds and that sort of thing. They submitted these plans, which are dated June 1st, right here. These are the plans. They show the inlet, the outlet, the elevations on those inlet and outlet. Actually, they show 1, 2, 3 catch basin manholes, rather, on that plan. The plan is right there. It shows the whole project. Florian was the architect of this plan. Florian came up with this whole scheme that we would go to the hospital, we would present it to Charlie Theron and meet with them and see if they would take care of the drainage, the excavation portion of this. Menard Engineering was hired for the plans, as you see, and they came up with this plan on June 9th. On June 8th, we have Palmer Construction's bid to the hospital. This was on June 1st. His bid is on June 8th that he signed a contract with the hospital for $40,000 to do the project.
No, he signed to trench the 36-inch storm drain, install bedding and 36-inch piping, backfilled by others, excavate one manhole. He did not sign for that. It's not on.
This is the plan we had right here.
It's not in the hospital contract. It's written.
Okay.
It can't be more obvious.
All right, let me finish. Okay. Okay, we signed that plan. And June 8th, his contract was signed. Finally, the project was started, I believe, on August 16th. And if there had been any additions or changes to this, Florian had a plan. He could have come to the town and said, there are additional changes involved in this. The town meeting on May 11th, a special town meeting, the option 1 from Menard Engineering for the road drainage project was discussed. The option is less invasive for the hospital. Mr. Laux passed out the cost estimate for this project, which we had it priced out, and this is a price out that I had worked out with Florian, and we came out with $40,000 for the hospital project. It was actually $39,000, and when he signed the contract, he signed it for $40,000. Anyway, let me finish reading. The portion, this option is less invasive for the hospital. Mr. Laux passed out the cost estimate. The town's portion would be approximately $69,000, $656. That was for the pipe, the stone, the fabric going over it, and also the backfilling, which the town crew was to do. And the hospital share for the trenching, which trenching was considered this project, was for $39,000. The town's portion would be paid through a budget line item. Mr. Matthews made a motion that the board proceed with the King Hill Road Drainage Project per option 1 of Leonard Engineering, seconded by Mrs. Salvos. In the discussion, Mrs. Salvos stated she would like a copy of all the options and stated that the town owns the property right back to the brook. The vote was taken on the motion and it carried unanimously. Mr. Lout stated that the Wetlands Commission approval would be needed and the work would be probably started in July. As part of this option, Leonard Engineering needs to do engineering for the inlet and the outlet design of the culvert design. The fee was $7,000 for this, which is included in the $69,656. Mr. Matthews made a motion to authorize Mr. Laux to sign this agreement. This was in May. And this came out in June 1st, which was stated, and the bid was put in to the hospital on June 8th. Okay. Finally, the project, summer long, I know Florian had a big project he was working on in Salisbury, and he was tied up on that project.
Mr. Brody, would you please turn your phone off? Thank you. I'm sorry.
Okay, and he finally got started on the project. When we were cutting down some of the trees and cutting them out, we had our backhoe there pulling the stumps. Florian said to me, "Don't bother, my excavator can tear them right out." That was his comment to me. That's it. So
Did you assume he was going to do that for free?
He volunteered to do it.
No, he made a statement to you, Bob. You're managing this job.
All right.
Or mismanaging this job.
All right. Well, I think that what needs to happen here, well, I'll continue. Anyway, the job went on, and it was finally finished on, let me see. Last day was September 29th. Last day the project was done. September 30th, we had a hard rain. We washed out a little bit, a couple areas of the outlet pool. The town crew went back in and replaced them ourselves. October 7th, Florian's wife Betsy came to deliver the bill to the town of Sharon Tina's office. I was out of the office at the time. I came back in. Tina handed me the bill and she said, "Here, this is not our bill, this is the hospital's bill." I took it right down to the hospital, and at that time they had changed CEOs. Originally, Florian and I had met with the CEO of the hospital, Charlie Theron, and Brian Krogan, and a round table in Charlie's office, and the project was described, and we were all in agreement. Florian would pay for the excavation portion of it, the hospital would pay for the excavation portion of this, and the town would pay, as I said, for the pipe, the excavate, the stone, the fabric, and the town crew would backfill it. Okay, I took the bill down and handed and spoke with Kim Lumia, the new CEO, and she said, "No, we've already got our bill for $40,000. I called up Florian, he said, and I set up a meeting with Kim Lumia and Brian Krogan again. We went down, we spoke to them. They said no more funds. They had paid their portion of it. And when we walked out, Florian said he would stop in and come back in and discuss the bill with me, and which didn't happen for a long time. He finally came into my office. That was in October 14th. He finally came back into my office on March 1st, late in the afternoon regarding the payment of this bill, which he sent me a bill for $36,330, $30.30. Okay, I asked him if he would accept an amount smaller than that, because when we met with Charlie Theron, one of the things that we stressed with him is that the town could not go out, if the town was going to do a project over $20,000, we would have to go out to bid. We'd have to get at least 3 bids. And this was one of the things that we were stressed with the hospital, why we were having them do the project so we wouldn't have to go out to bid. And Florian emphasized that with Brian Cogan and Charlie Theron. Okay, and so Florian never told me there was going to be any additional charges, because, and he knew as well as I did, out of this $36,000, if I was to pay that bill, I was going to have to go back to my Board of Selectmen, my Board of Finance, and to a town meeting to authorize it. And that was never discussed. He signed his contract on June 8th, didn't start the job until August 16th. He had almost over 2 months to come back and tell me if there was going to be additional charges on that job. I never heard a peep out of it. Okay, when he came into my office on March 1st, I asked him if he would take less than $20,000. He said, no, that's half my bill. I said, look, I've got a letter here from Charlie Theron, because I called him up in Maine. I said, what did you feel the agreement was? So he sent me back this letter.
Could you read that, please?
Yes, I will. He said, I apologize for the delay in responding. After you called, I misplaced my note and discovered it this weekend. I am no longer associated with Sharon Hospital, and my comments are without authority. You requested that I put my recollections in writing. My recollection of the arrangement is that Sharon Hospital agreed to pay Palmer Construction $40,000 for the excavation portion of the storm drain project on King Hill Road, and that Sharon Hospital had no further obligation beyond the $40,000. Additionally, the town of Sharon was to pay for the pipe materials, and the town crew would perform the backfilling of the project. I hope this is of assistance. This is from Charlie Theron.
What's the date of that, please?
February 14th, 2011.
I don't think that's in dispute.
No,
Okay.
I agree. There's no dispute. That's the hospital contract, period.
Wait a
minute, I haven't finished yet. I told Florian I had this letter. He stood up and said, I'll take $20,000, and walked out of my office. I discussed this with the town attorney, Judy Dixon, and I know this is an aggravation point, but during the process, the job was stopped by FEMA because they were not using a trench box and the ditch was too deep.
That's irrelevant.
What's the
I asked,
Nothing.
I will tell you what it has to do.
Wow.
Judy Dixon advised me to get a copy of that to make sure the town was not tied into that somehow. We were not affected by that fine.
So were we?
No,
So
we're not.
wait a minute, let me finish.
Why are you bringing
Why are you
this
bringing it up?
up, Bob, when it had nothing to do with the project?
Because Judy Dixon advised me to do it.
You're saying this because you want to,
No, I'm saying it because that was the advice that I got from town attorneys. I asked Florian about to come in and let me see, and he said, we're not going there, and he walked out of my office. And that's where it sat until we started dealing with it now.
I'm looking at invoice 27695, dated 9/14/2010. It's during the work period where he was working for the hospital, and it's for located sewer laterals and main. It's for work on sewer laterals. Did you authorize me to work on sewer laterals and mains? Did you?
Florian called Mark Sweeney from the sewer and water company, and we knew that there were sewer laterals going across that road all the time. We talked about it all the time. And they had to stop and tie in when they crossed it. They had to disrupt those sewer laterals, and they had to put them back together.
So he didn't do the work.
Yeah,
And that was not in the hospital bid.
and it wasn't in any agreement with me either.
Did you tell him to do it?
He had to do it in order to prove.
Bob, you're the chief executive officer of the town.
No.
You're managing this job. You're the general contractor. Florian told us time after time. Mike Malcolm will tell you, when we first started this project, the town is the general contractor. We were told that when we went out.
And plans reflect that.
At what point are you talking about, John?
When we first approached this project, did not Florian come to us and say we were the general contractor for the non-hospital portion?
Yes.
We were the general contractor, then we're responsible.
Florian was the general contractor.
No, he wasn't.
No, your plans, Bob, your June plans are very clear in the spec. The town of Sharon is the general contractor on this job. The town of Sharon was the GC.
Where did you see that?
It's in your specs, in your plans. The town of Sharon was the applicant to the Inland Wetlands Commission for the work to be done.
Florian made his bid to the Sharon Hospital.
He was the general contractor for the hospital. Not us.
He was
Not us.
To the hospital.
For the trenching.
For the trenching.
And
For
again,
specific project.
Your May 11th, 2010 minutes established that the price had been fixed as to what the hospital was going to contribute. And that was a month before you had ever received these, and before the design of the inlet and outlet was even known to this Board of Selectmen.
He signed this on June 8th. These came out on June 1st.
Absolutely no question, but you're making the assumption here that these are the plans that he was referring to in that contract. But my comment is one, that is not the case, but even if it was the case, the description of the work controls, it does not say we're going to do all the work in the plan. It says he's doing the trenching, he's going to put the bedding in, and he's going to do one manhole. That's the plan, that's the description of the work. That controls, regardless of which set of plans you're talking about, that controls. That's all he agreed to do.
And Charlie Theron understood it the same way. The town of Sharon was to pay for the pipe, material, and the town crew would perform the backfill.
And he says his recollection is not clear. It was more than a year. You have a written contract. That's what controls.
Dr. Brown? Sharon Connecticut?
Yeah, if I may speak, I'd like to make a couple of quote historical and quote drainage comments. Because the history of this problem is very complicated. And the drainage aspects of it are also very complicated. I was in office from 2005 to 2009, and it took me a long time to understand exactly what the drainage problems seemed to be and how they had come about. It did not take me a long time to understand how upset Ms. Keeley was, because she would point that out to me frequently. She was justified in being upset, in my opinion, because she was justified, again, in my opinion, in holding a position that the town held responsibility for, quote, ruining her property. Now, the hospital has been on that property since about, I think, 1928, slowly growing. But the major expanse was 1991. But let me back up just a decade. Margaret signed a drainage easement in the early 1980s for drainage coming down from the hospital to King Hill Road. And here's where it's a little complicated. It goes underneath Hospital Hill Road into a pond, comes back underneath King Hill Road, which is really basically the same road, and onto her property. Well, at the time, in 1981, when she signed that drainage easement, I didn't think, I know, she didn't think that was going to be a big deal. The hospital expanded its parking lot with the permission of our Inland and Wetlands Commission in 1991. The hospital, the parking lot that they built then is the one that you see today. It's really very, very big. I think it's quite fair for her to feel that she got a lot of water out of that expansion. And here, if I'm out of place or inaccurate, please someone interrupt me and tell me so. But she, Ms. Kilby, sued the hospital and the town over the resulting drainage in the 1990s. The suit went on for 6 years, and she won against both parties. One of the aspects of the settlement of that was that the town was never to approve another project that would increase the drainage. Well, we came close to that at about the time I was coming into office because the hospital was interested in building a doctor's office building on the left-hand side of Hospital Hill Road as you go downhill near the bottom. She was very upset about that, as were surrounding neighbors. That project did not take place, unfortunately. From a drainage point of view, it's probably fortunate, but in any case, my next thought was, now hold it, that interrupted my train of thought for just a second. She went on continuing to be terribly upset about the drainage ditch that was going across her property. And let's all face it, rainfall did increase during the 1990s. And during the 2000s, we had massive rainstorms, massive amounts of water going across her property. The ditch grew to be easily 10 feet